When a billionaire CEO shows up at your door on Christmas night, you know something has gone terribly wrong or terribly right. Evan Pierce thought he'd hit rock bottom the day his wife walked out. He was wrong. The real bottom was Christmas Eve, alone in a warehouse apartment, too broke to visit his daughter, too proud to admit he was drowning. Then at 11:47 p.m., 3 knocks shattered the silence. On the other side stood Cassandra Wren, the woman who signed his paychecks, wore $1,000 suits, and had never looked at him twice. Except she had been looking. And what she saw changed everything. If you want to know how a single night can rewrite your entire life, stay with me until the end. Drop a like if you believe in second chances, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The snow had been falling for 3 hours straight, turning Portland into something that looked peaceful from a distance and merciless up close. The kind of snow that made the city beautiful in photographs and dangerous for anyone actually living in it. Evan Pierce stood at the window of his third-floor apartment, watching the flakes accumulate on the fire escape, and felt the weight of the silence pressing against his chest like a physical thing. Christmas night. The night when every light in every window was supposed to mean something. Family, warmth, belonging. All Evan's window showed was the reflection of a man who'd gotten very good at pretending he wasn't falling apart. He told himself he was fine with being alone tonight. Lily was with her grandparents in Seattle, probably surrounded by cousins and presents and the kind of Christmas chaos he couldn't afford to give her anymore. His ex-wife Michelle was God knew where, probably posting pictures of her new life with her new boyfriend on social media, living the freedom she'd said she needed when she'd left 18 months ago. And Evan was here, in 600 square feet of rented space that smelled like old carpet and the microwave dinner he'd barely touched. The apartment was clean, he'd made sure of that. Not because anyone was coming, but because keeping things in order was one of the few things he could still control. The small artificial tree in the corner blinked with lights he'd bought on clearance 3 years ago. Lily's stocking hung from a nail he'd driven into the wall, empty because she wasn't here to fill it. On the coffee table, a stack of bills sat next to his laptop, a visual reminder that his warehouse supervisor salary was enough to survive on, but not enough to actually live. Evan checked his phone again. 11:23 p.m. Lily had called earlier, her 7-year-old voice bright with excitement about the bike Santa had brought her. He'd smiled through the conversation, asked all the right questions, told her he loved her, and then sat in the silence afterward feeling like a failure. The bike had come from his parents, not him. He'd sent what he could, but it hadn't been enough for the kind of Christmas a little girl deserved. He moved away from the window and sat on the couch, the springs creaking under his weight. The TV was off. He'd tried watching something earlier but couldn't focus, couldn't stand the canned laughter and artificial cheer. The silence was better, even if it felt like drowning. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Lily's asleep. She had a wonderful day. Don't be so hard on yourself, sweetheart." Evan stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. What was he supposed to say? That he was fine? That spending Christmas alone in an apartment that still had boxes he hadn't unpacked from the divorce was exactly where he wanted to be? He typed out a response. "Thanks, Mom. Give her a kiss for me," and set the phone down. The divorce had been Michelle's idea, her decision, her escape route, but somehow Evan was the one who'd ended up in this place, in this life that felt like it was happening to someone else. He'd tried to be a good husband, tried to provide, to be present, to do everything right. But right hadn't been enough. She'd wanted more excitement, more passion, more of something he apparently couldn't give. So she'd left. And the custody arrangement had landed in a place where Lily spent most of her time with her mother, and Evan got weekends and holidays when it was convenient. Except this Christmas, it hadn't been convenient. Michelle had booked a trip to Cabo with her boyfriend, and Evan couldn't afford to take time off work to drive to Seattle. So Lily had gone to her grandparents', and Evan had spent Christmas Eve helping unload a semi-truck full of electronics at the warehouse, then come home to an empty apartment and a microwave dinner. He leaned his head back against the couch and closed his eyes. 37 years old. A decade ago, he'd thought he'd have it all figured out by now. A career, a family, a house with a yard where Lily could play. Instead, he had a job that paid the bills but offered no future. a daughter he only saw part-time, and a life that felt like it was permanently stuck in neutral. The knock came at 11:47 p.m. 3 sharp raps against the door, clear and deliberate. Evan's eyes snapped open. For a moment he thought he'd imagined it. Nobody knocked on his door at this hour. Nobody knocked on his door at any hour. He didn't have friends who dropped by unannounced, didn't have neighbors who needed to borrow sugar, didn't have anyone in his life who would show up on Christmas night without calling first. The knock came again. 3 more raps, identical to the first. Evan stood, his heart suddenly beating faster. He moved to the door and looked through the peephole, expecting to see a drunk neighbor at the wrong apartment, or maybe a delivery driver with a package for someone else. What he saw instead made him step back from the door. Cassandra Wren stood in the hallway, her dark hair dusted with snow, wearing a long wool coat that probably cost more than Evan's monthly rent. She wasn't looking at her phone or checking her watch. She was just standing there, waiting, a simple brown paper bag in her hands. Evan's mind went blank. Then it started racing. Cassandra Wren, the CEO of Meridian Distribution, the woman who ran the company where Evan supervised the night shift in Warehouse C, the woman who appeared in company-wide emails and quarterly meetings, who wore designer suits and spoke in the kind of confident, measured tones that made it clear she was used to being the smartest person in any room. And she was standing outside his apartment on Christmas night at nearly midnight. For a wild moment, Evan thought there must be an emergency. A problem at the warehouse, maybe. A brioche or a break-in, or something that required his immediate attention. But that didn't make sense. Cassandra Wren didn't show up at employees' homes. She had assistants for that. She had managers and directors, and an entire chain of command between her and a warehouse supervisor. He opened the door. "Mr. Pierce," she said, and even her voice sounded different here, quieter, almost uncertain. "I'm sorry to show up like this. I know it's late." Evan stared at her, aware that he was wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, that his hair was a mess, that his apartment behind him probably looked exactly like what it was, the home of someone barely keeping it together. "Ms. Wren," he managed, "is everything okay? Is there a problem at work?" "No," she said quickly. "No, nothing like that. She paused, and Evan saw something he'd never seen in her before. Hesitation. Cassandra Wren, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar contracts, looked almost nervous. "I heard you were spending Christmas alone. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I brought food." She held up the paper bag as if it explained everything. Evan's brain struggled to process what was happening. "You brought food," he repeated slowly. "Yes. I know it's strange. I know this is... I should have called, but I didn't have your number, and I thought if I called through HR it would seem even more strange. And then I was already in my car, and..." She stopped herself, took a breath. "I'm sorry. I can leave. This was a terrible idea." "No," Evan heard himself say. "No, it's okay. I'm surprised. Please, come in." He stepped back, holding the door open, and watched as Cassandra Wren walked into his apartment. She moved carefully, as if aware she was entering foreign territory, her eyes taking in the small space with an expression Evan couldn't quite read. The blinking Christmas tree, the stack of bills, the couch that had come with the apartment, the single plate in the dish drainer by the sink. "I'm sorry about the mess," Evan said automatically, even though the apartment was spotless. "It's not messy," Cassandra said. She set the bag on the small kitchen counter. "It's actually very organized. Much more than my place, if I'm honest." Evan closed the door, still trying to make sense of this. "Can I take your coat?" "Thank you." She shrugged out of the coat, and Evan saw she was wearing jeans and a simple sweater. Not the power suits he was used to seeing. She looked younger somehow, more human, and Evan realized he had no idea how old she was. 40? 45? It was impossible to tell. He hung her coat on the rack by the door next to his own jacket, and the domesticity of the gesture felt surreal. "I brought sandwiches," Cassandra said, unpacking the bag. "From this deli on Northwest 23rd. I didn't know what you liked, so I got a variety. Turkey, roast beef, vegetarian, and some cookies. I realize now that this probably seems insane." "It seems kind," Evan said, and meant it. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Evan saw something flicker across her face. Relief, maybe, or recognition. "I'll make tea," he said, because he needed something to do with his hands. "Or I have beer if you'd prefer." Tea would be perfect. Evan moved to the kitchen, grateful for the task. He filled the kettle, set it on the stove, pulled down 2 mugs from the cabinet. Cassandra had moved to the window, was looking out at the snow the way he'd been doing just minutes before. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "From up here. You don't notice how quiet the city gets on Christmas night until you're out in it." "You drove here," Evan said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, from the West Hills, about 20 minutes in this weather." She turned to face him. "I know I'm probably violating about a dozen HR policies by being here, but I promise this isn't about work, and I'm not here to make you uncomfortable. She paused again, choosing her words carefully. "I heard through the grapevine that you were spending tonight alone, and I know what that's like. And I thought maybe neither of us should do that." The kettle began to whistle. Evan poured water into both mugs, dropped tea bags in, and carried them to the small table where Cassandra had laid out the sandwiches. She'd arranged them on the plates he'd left in the drainer, had found napkins in the drawer. It was such a simple thing, but it made his chest tight. They sat down across from each other. Evan picked up a turkey sandwich, not because he was hungry, but because he needed something to do. Cassandra did the same. "The grapevine," Evan said. "That's an interesting way to put it." "I pay attention," Cassandra said. "More than people think. I know you're divorced. I know you have a daughter. I know you picked up 3 extra shifts this month to cover someone else's vacation time." She took a small bite of her sandwich, swallowed. "I know you're one of the best supervisors we have, even though you've never once asked for a promotion or a raise." Evan set his sandwich down. "Ms. Wren." "Cassandra," she interrupted gently. "If I'm sitting in your kitchen at midnight on Christmas, I think we can use first names." "Cassandra," Evan corrected. "Why are you really here?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers wrapped around her mug. Steam rose between them, curling in the air. "Because 3 years ago," she finally said, "I watched you spend 45 minutes helping a new hire figure out the inventory system. He was struggling, clearly overwhelmed, probably worried he was about to lose his job. And you stayed late on your own time, walking him through every step, making him feel capable instead of stupid. I was doing a walkthrough that night. I try to visit the warehouses when most people don't expect me. I saw the whole thing from the mezzanine." Evan remembered that night. The kid's name had been Marcus, fresh out of high school, trying to support his mother. He'd gotten the hang of it eventually, was still working there as far as Evan knew. "That's what supervisors do," Evan said. "No," Cassandra said firmly. "That's what good people do. Most supervisors would have written him up, marked him as a liability, let him fail. You taught him. You made him better. And you never mentioned it to anyone, never tried to use it as leverage for recognition or advancement. You did it because it was right." "I still don't understand why that matters now." "Because I've been running Meridian for 8 years, Cassandra said. "I've met hundreds of employees. I've reviewed thousands of performance reports. And in all that time, I've learned that real strength doesn't look like ambition or aggression. It looks like patience. It looks like showing up. It looks like you." Evan felt something crack open in his chest. He looked down at his tea, at his reflection distorted in the dark liquid. "I'm not strong," he said quietly. "I'm barely keeping my head above water." "I know," Cassandra said, and her voice was so gentle it almost hurt. "I know what that looks like too." "Do you?" The words came out sharper than he intended. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. You live in the West Hills. You probably have a closet bigger than this apartment. So forgive me if I have trouble believing you know what it's like to be drowning." He expected her to bristle, to leave, to remind him who she was and who he was, and the vast distance between them. Instead, she nodded. "You're right," she said. "I have money. I have status. I have a house that's too big and too empty. But do you want to know what I did tonight before I drove here? I sat in that house surrounded by catering I'd ordered because I didn't want to cook for myself, and I realized I didn't have a single person to call. Not one. I have employees who need me and a board that tolerates me and competitors who hate me. but I don't have anyone who actually knows me. She took a sip of tea, her hand steady, but her voice not quite. My parents died 6 years ago, within 2 months of each other. I have a brother I haven't spoken to in 3 years because we disagree about how I run the company. I've been married and divorced twice, both times to men who loved my money more than they loved me. I spend 80 hours a week working because when I stop, when I sit still, all I feel is the quiet. And tonight, on Christmas, in a house full of rooms I never use, I felt that quiet and I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Evan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the designer clothes and the executive polish to something he recognized, the same loneliness he saw in his own mirror every morning. So I got in my car, Cassandra continued, and I drove to a deli I like, and I bought sandwiches and cookies, and I drove to your address, which I absolutely should not have looked up in our HR files. And I knocked on your door because I thought maybe we could be lonely together instead of alone, which in retrospect sounds completely insane. It doesn't sound insane, Evan said. It sounds honest. Honest, Cassandra repeated, as if testing the word. I'm not used to that. In my world, everything is strategy and positioning and careful phrasing. You learn to say what people need to hear instead of what you actually feel. That sounds exhausting. It is. She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. But you get used to it, or you think you do, until you're sitting in your kitchen on Christmas night eating catered salmon by yourself and you realize you've forgotten what it feels like to have an actual conversation. Evan picked up his sandwich again, took a real bite this time. It was good, better than anything he'd eaten in weeks. They ate in silence for a while, but it wasn't the heavy silence that had filled the apartment before she arrived. It was different, lighter, somehow. Tell me about Lily, Cassandra said eventually. Evan felt his face change, felt the automatic smile that always came when someone mentioned his daughter. She's 7, smart as hell, funny, too kind for her own good sometimes. She loves art and dinosaurs and asking questions that I have no idea how to answer. Questions like what? Like, why do people have to work if it makes them tired? Like whether clouds get lonely when they're the only one in the sky. Like why her mom doesn't want to live with us anymore. The last one slipped out before he could stop it. Cassandra's expression shifted, softened. That's a hard question, she said. Yeah. Evan set the sandwich down again, his appetite gone. I still don't have a good answer for it. The truth is, her mom wanted a different life. Wanted freedom, wanted excitement, wanted things I couldn't give her. But how do you explain that to a 7-year-old without making her think it's her fault? Without making her think she wasn't enough? You can't, Cassandra said, because she'll think it anyway. Kids do. They take the pain adults create and they make it about themselves. It's not fair, but it's true. You sound like you know. My parents worked constantly, Cassandra said. Built their business from nothing, became successful, gave me every material advantage, but they were never home. And for years I thought it was because I wasn't interesting enough, wasn't worth coming home to. It took me until I was 30 to realize their absence was about them, not me, but the damage was already done. Is that why you work so much? Evan asked. Cassandra was quiet for a moment. Maybe, she finally said, or maybe I just don't know what else to do. Work makes sense. It has rules and metrics and clear outcomes. The rest of life is messier. Yeah, Evan agreed. It really is. They finished eating. Evan cleared the plates, started to clean up, but Cassandra stood and helped without asking. They worked side by side in the small kitchen, washing and drying, putting things away. It felt natural in a way Evan couldn't explain, this simple domestic rhythm with a woman who was essentially a stranger, but somehow wasn't. When they sat back down, this time on the couch, Cassandra looked at the Christmas tree with its blinking lights. You said Lily's with her grandparents? She asked. Yeah, in Seattle. My ex couldn't take her because she went to Mexico with her boyfriend, and I couldn't afford to take time off, so my parents stepped in. They're great with her. Better than I can be right now, honestly. Why do you say that? Evan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because I'm working 60 hours a week just to make rent and child support. Because when I do have her, I'm too tired to be the dad she deserves. Because I keep telling myself I'm doing my best, but my best isn't enough. It's never enough. The words poured out of him, months of exhaustion and frustration and fear finally finding voice. I missed her school play because I had to cover a shift. I forgot her doctor's appointment because I was training a new hire. I bought her birthday present at a discount store because I couldn't afford what she actually wanted. And every single time, I see this look in her eyes like she's trying to understand why her dad can't just be there, can't just show up, can't just... His voice broke. He stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes, trying to hold it together. He felt Cassandra's hand on his shoulder, warm and steady. "Evan," she said quietly, "you're not failing her. You're showing her what it looks like to keep going when everything is hard. You're showing her resilience." "Resilience," he repeated bitterly. "That's just a pretty word for barely surviving." "No," Cassandra said firmly. "Resilience is getting up every day even when you don't want to. It's working extra shifts even when you're exhausted. It's making sandwiches and reading bedtime stories and being present in every way you can be, even when it feels like it's not enough. That's not barely surviving. That's loving someone more than yourself." Evan lowered his hands, looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because I've spent my entire adult life building a company, proving I was capable, showing everyone I could succeed. And at the end of every day, I go home to silence. I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, and it all feels hollow because there's no one to share it with, no one who needs me just because of who I am, not what I can provide." She paused. "You have someone who loves you unconditionally, who thinks about you, who misses you, who wants to be with you even when you think you're failing. Do you know how rare that is? Then why does it feel like I'm losing her?" "Because you're scared. And fear makes everything look like failure." "But Evan, I've been watching you for 3 years. I've seen how your team respects you, how you handle problems, how you treat people. That doesn't come from someone who's failing. That comes from someone who has real character." Evan felt something shift inside him, some weight he'd been carrying finally starting to ease. "Why do you care?" he asked. "About me. About any of this. You could be anywhere tonight. Why here?" Cassandra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because 3 years ago, I watched you show kindness to someone who needed it. And tonight, I needed kindness. I needed to be around someone real, someone who hasn't forgotten how to be human in all the noise. I needed..." She stopped, took a breath. "I needed not to be alone." "You're not alone," Evan said. "Neither are you." They sat there in the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights, the snow still falling outside, the silence no longer heavy, but something close to peaceful. Cassandra's hand was still on his shoulder, and Evan realized he couldn't remember the last time someone had touched him like this. Not romantically, not sexually, just human contact that said, "You're not invisible, you matter, I'm here." "Can I tell you something?" Cassandra said. "Anything. I came here tonight because I wanted to help you. I had this whole idea in my head about offering you a promotion or a raise or something that would fix your problems. But sitting here talking to you, I realize that's not what either of us needs. We don't need transactions. We need connection." "What do you need?" Evan asked. "To remember what it feels like to be seen. Not as a CEO or a boss or a dollar sign, but as a person. Someone who gets tired and lonely and scared just like everyone else." "I see you," Evan said. "I see someone who drove across the city on Christmas night because she couldn't stand the quiet. Someone who brought sandwiches to a stranger's apartment because she remembered what kindness looked like. I see someone brave enough to admit they're lonely in a world that thinks loneliness is weakness." Cassandra's eyes were bright, and Evan realized she was fighting tears. "Thank you," she whispered. They talked until the sky started to lighten, until the snow stopped falling and the city began to wake. They talked about childhoods and disappointments, about dreams that hadn't worked out and fears that kept them up at night. They talked about the weird satisfaction of perfectly organizing a warehouse and the strange loneliness of boardroom meetings, where everyone agrees with you because they have to. They talked about Lily's dinosaur obsession and Cassandra's secret love of bad reality TV and the way grief never quite leaves, just becomes something you learn to carry. At some point, Evan made more tea. At another point, Cassandra pulled out her phone and showed him pictures of the house in the West Hills. Beautiful and sterile, like something from a magazine. They laughed about the time Evan had accidentally knocked over an entire pallet of merchandise and spent 4 hours reorganizing it, and the time Cassandra had fallen asleep in a board meeting and woken up to everyone staring at her. When the light through the window turned from black to gray to pale winter morning, Cassandra stood. "I should go," she said. "You probably need sleep, and I've already taken up enough of your night." "You haven't," Evan said, standing with her. I needed this. I didn't know I needed it, but I did." "Me too." He got her coat, helped her into it. At the door, she turned to face him. "Evan, I meant what I said earlier, about you being a good person, a good leader. I want to offer you something, but I don't want you to feel pressured. And I don't want you to think this is why I came here tonight, because it's not." "What kind of offer?" "A new position, Employee Wellness and Operations Liaison. It's a role I've been thinking about creating for a while. Someone who works with warehouse teams to improve conditions, create support systems, make sure people aren't just surviving but actually able to live. Better pay, better hours, more flexibility. I need someone who understands what it's like to struggle, who leads with empathy instead of ego. I think you're that person." Evan stared at her. That's a real position?" "It will be, if you want it. Take time to think about it. Talk to Lily, maybe. See if it's something that would actually help instead of just being more pressure. But know that the offer is genuine, and it's based on 3 years of watching you be exactly the kind of person we need more of in this company." "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet. Think about it. We can talk after the holidays." She reached out, squeezed his hand. "Thank you for tonight, Evan, for letting me in, for being honest, for reminding me what it feels like to have a real conversation." "Thank you for showing up," Evan said, "for seeing me, for all of it." She smiled, and it was the first time he'd seen her smile like that, unguarded, genuine, warm. "Merry Christmas, Evan." "Merry Christmas, Cassandra." She left, and Evan watched through the window as she walked to her car, brushed snow off the windshield, drove away. He stood there for a long time after her taillights disappeared, feeling the apartment around him differently than he had just hours before. It was still small. The bills were still on the coffee table. Lily was still in Seattle. Nothing had materially changed, but the silence felt different now. Not like punishment or loneliness, but like possibility. Like the space between breaths before something begins. Evan looked at the Christmas tree, its light still blinking steadily in the morning light. He thought about Cassandra's offer, about what it might mean for his future, for Lily's future. He thought about the strange and unexpected gift of being seen, really seen, by someone who understood what it meant to feel invisible. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Lily's up. She wants to call you before breakfast." Evan smiled, picked up his phone, and waited for his daughter's face to fill the screen. When she appeared, sleepy-eyed and smiling, still in her Christmas pajamas, he felt something settle in his chest. "Hi, baby girl," he said. "Hi, Daddy. Guess what? I saw a reindeer outside last night. Well, it was probably a deer, but I'm calling it a reindeer." "That counts," Evan said. "Tell me about it." And as Lily launched into an elaborate story about the reindeer and its family and how it had definitely been looking for Santa, Evan realized something had shifted. The fear was still there, the exhaustion, the uncertainty. But alongside it was something else now, something that felt almost like hope. The apartment was still small, but for the first time in 18 months, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a beginning. The next morning came too early and somehow not early enough. Evan woke on the couch where he'd collapsed after talking to Lily, his phone still in his hand, his neck stiff from the angle he'd been sleeping at. For a moment, he couldn't remember why he felt different, why the apartment seemed less oppressive than it had the day before. Then it all came back. The knock at the door, Cassandra's unexpected visit, the hours of conversation that had felt like opening a window in a room that had been sealed shut for too long. He sat up, rubbed his face, checked the time. 10:30. He'd slept later than he had in months, and for once he didn't feel guilty about it. The warehouse didn't need him today. It was the day after Christmas. The building closed except for essential security. He had nowhere to be, nothing demanding his immediate attention. The apartment looked different in daylight. The Christmas tree lights were off now, revealing the cheap plastic branches and faded ornaments for what they were. The paper bag from the sandwiches sat folded on the counter, and Evan found himself staring at it, proof that last night had actually happened. That Cassandra Wren had really stood in his kitchen, had really sat on his couch, had really offered him something that sounded too good to be true. Employee wellness and operations liaison. Better pay, better hours, more flexibility. A chance to actually be present for Lily instead of always choosing between her and keeping the lights on. Evan wanted to believe it was real, but years of disappointment had taught him to be cautious about hope. Things that sounded too good usually were. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was spam, but something made him pick up. Hello? Evan, it's Cassandra. I hope I'm not calling too early. His heart jumped. No, not at all. I just woke up, actually. Good. You needed the sleep. There was a pause, and he could hear traffic in the background. I wanted to follow up on what we talked about last night. I know I said to take time to think about it, but I realized I didn't give you enough information to actually make a decision. Would you be willing to meet? Maybe grab coffee? Evan looked down at his sweatpants, his wrinkled shirt. When? Today, if possible. I know it's last minute, and if you have plans with Lily, she's still in Seattle, Evan said. And I don't have any plans. Where did you want to meet? There's a coffee shop on Division. Oblique, do you know it? I can find it. 11:30? Evan glanced at the time again. That gave him an hour. I'll be there. Thank you, Evan, and this isn't a work meeting. Don't stress about it. Just coffee and conversation. Okay, he said, though his pulse was already racing. I'll see you soon. He showered quickly, shaved for the first time in 3 days, pulled on the nicest jeans he owned and a button-down shirt that didn't have any visible stains or wrinkles. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and saw a man trying very hard to look like he had his life together. It was almost convincing. The drive to Division took 20 minutes through post-holiday traffic. Portland looked hungover, the streets half empty, the usual bustle replaced by a sleepy quiet. Evan found parking a block away from the coffee shop and walked through air cold enough to make his breath visible. Oblique was one of those deliberately understated places. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, coffee that probably cost more than it should. The kind of place Evan never went because it felt designed for people who had the luxury of caring about pour-over versus French press. Cassandra was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window. She'd changed since last night, too. Dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back simply. Without the CEO armor of a suit and heels, she looked more like the woman who'd sat in his apartment at midnight, vulnerable and honest. She saw him and smiled. Evan felt something in his chest relax. Thank you for coming, she said as he sat down. I already ordered. I hope that's okay. I got you a regular coffee. I figured if you wanted something fancy, you'd say so. Regular coffee is perfect. A barista brought over 2 mugs and a plate of pastries. Cassandra waited until they were alone again before speaking. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. After I left your place, I went home and just kept thinking about everything we talked about the company, about what we could do differently. I've been CEO for 8 years, and I focused on profit margins and efficiency and market share. All the things you're supposed to focus on. But I've never thought about whether the people working for me can actually afford to live. Not really. Evan took a sip of coffee. It was good, rich and strong, the kind that actually tasted like coffee instead of syrup. Most companies don't think about that. Which is exactly the problem, Cassandra said. I pay minimum wage for entry-level positions because that's industry standard. I offer basic health insurance because that's legally required. I schedule shifts back-to-back because that's efficient. And the whole time, I tell myself I'm running a good company because our turnover is lower than our competitors and our safety record is decent. But decent isn't good enough. Not when I know people like you are working themselves to exhaustion just to survive. It's not your fault, Evan said. The system is broken. You didn't break it. No, but I benefit from it. And I can choose to do something different. She leaned forward, her hands wrapped around her mug. That's what the employee wellness position is about. I want someone who can bridge the gap between executive decisions and actual human impact. Someone who can tell me when our policies are hurting people, even if it's not showing up in quarterly reports. Someone who understands what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries because I've structured things in a way that makes that choice necessary. And you think I can do that? I know you can. You've been living it. You know exactly what needs to change because you've experienced what's broken. She paused. But I need you to understand what this role would actually involve. It's not just a promotion with better pay. It's a complete restructuring of how we approach employee support. You'd be creating something from nothing, building systems that don't exist yet, pushing back against managers who think flexibility is a weakness. It would be challenging. Challenging sounds better than barely surviving, Evans said. Cassandra smiled, but it was tinged with something sad. I want to be clear about the compensation. The salary would be $75,000 a year. Health insurance with full coverage, including dental and vision. 3 weeks paid vacation. Flexible scheduling with remote work options when needed. And a budget to implement programs you think would actually help. Childcare support, mental health resources, emergency assistance funds. Evan set his coffee down because his hands were shaking. $75,000. He was making $38,000 right now, working 60 hours a week. This was nearly double, with benefits that would mean he could actually take Lily to the dentist without worrying about the bill. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Cassandra said. Really think about it. Not just whether you want it, but whether it's something you're capable of doing. Because if you take this role and it doesn't work out, you'll be right back where you started. Maybe worse. I need you to be sure. Why does it feel like you're trying to talk me out of it? Because I don't want to be another person who makes your life harder, Cassandra said quietly. Last night, you trusted me with your truth. You told me about Lily, about the divorce, about how hard everything has been. And now I'm offering you something that could change your life, but also something that comes with pressure and expectations. I need you to know that if you say no, if you decide this isn't right for you, it won't change anything. You'll still have your job at the warehouse. I won't hold it against you. Evan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same fear he felt reflected back. She was as scared of this as he was, just for different reasons. She was scared of making promises she couldn't keep, of offering hope and then watching it crumble. He was scared of believing in something good again and having it turn out to be another disappointment. Can I ask you something? Evan said. Why me? You have hundreds of employees. Some of them probably have degrees in human resources or social work or whatever qualifications usually matter for this kind of role. Why a warehouse supervisor with a half-finished bachelor's degree and more debt than savings? Cassandra was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Do you remember Marcus? The kid I helped with inventory? Yeah. He's still with us. Promoted twice. One of our best employees now. And do you know why? Because he's good at his job? Because you made him believe he could be good at his job. You saw potential in someone everyone else wrote off. That's not something you learn from a degree, Evan. That's character. She met his eyes. I've hired people with impressive resumes who treated employees like numbers on a spreadsheet. I've promoted managers who hit every metric but created toxic environments where people dreaded coming to work. Qualifications don't mean someone cares, you care. That's why you. Evan felt something crack open in his chest, the same feeling from last night when Cassandra had said she saw him. He'd spent so long feeling invisible, feeling like he was failing at everything that mattered, that hearing someone say he had value, real value, not just as a worker but as a person, was almost overwhelming. I want to say yes, he said. God, I want to say yes so badly, but I'm terrified I'll screw it up, that I'll take this opportunity and prove I'm not capable of anything more than showing up and doing what I'm told. Everyone feels that way when they're offered something bigger, Cassandra said. I felt it when I took over as CEO. I spent the first 6 months convinced someone was going to realize I had no idea what I was doing and fire me. But you know what I learned? Nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just trying our best with incomplete information and hoping it works out. That's not exactly reassuring. No, but it's honest, she smiled. And I'd rather work with someone who's honest about their fears than someone who pretends they have all the answers. They sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop filling up around them with people seeking warmth and caffeine and escape from their own lives. Evan watched a young couple at the counter laughing about something on one of their phones and felt a sharp pang of envy for whatever easy intimacy they had, whatever simple joy. "Tell me about the flexible scheduling," Evan said. "What would that actually look like?" Cassandra's expression shifted to something more businesslike, but not cold. Focused. "You'd set your own hours within reason. Core work time would be maybe 10 to 3, but you could adjust around Lily's needs. If she has a school event or a doctor's appointment or just needs you home, you work from home. If she's sick, you're with her, no questions asked. The point is that you have the autonomy to be a parent first and an employee second." "That sounds impossible." "It sounds unusual," Cassandra corrected. "But impossible is just what we've been told to accept. What if we decided to make it possible instead?" "Other managers would hate it," Evan said. "They'd see it as special treatment." "Let them. This is my company. I decide what matters." She paused. "But you're right that you'd face resistance. Some people believe suffering is necessary for success, that if work isn't painful, it doesn't count. You'd have to push back against that mindset constantly. Could you do that?" Evan thought about all the times he'd bitten his tongue when a manager made a stupid decision that hurt his team. All the times he'd wanted to speak up, but didn't because he couldn't afford to lose his job. What would it be like to have the authority to actually say, "No, this is wrong. We're doing it differently"? "I think I could," he said slowly, "if I knew I had support, if I wasn't fighting that battle alone." "You wouldn't be alone," Cassandra said. "I'd back you completely. That's part of what makes this work. You need to know that when you push for change, I'm pushing with you, not against you." "Why?" Evan asked. "Why do you care so much about changing things? You said yourself the company is profitable. You could keep doing what you're doing and still succeed by every standard measure." Cassandra looked out the window at the gray Portland morning, at the people hurrying past bundled in coats and scarves. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Because last night, sitting in your apartment, I realized I've built something that makes money but doesn't make meaning. I've created jobs but not lives. And I'm tired of feeling like my success is measured in profit margins, instead of whether the people working for me can actually be happy." She turned back to him. "My parents worked themselves to death building their business. Literally. My father had a heart attack at his desk at 62. My mother followed 6 weeks later from what the doctors called a stroke, but what I know was a broken heart. And for what? So they could have money they never spent and a company they never enjoyed. I don't want that to be my legacy." "What do you want your legacy to be?" "I want people to say Meridian was a place where they could work and still have a life. Where showing up didn't mean sacrificing everything else. Where being a good parent or taking care of your health or just being human wasn't seen as a weakness." She met his eyes. "I want what we build together to matter more than what we sell." Evan felt something shift in his understanding of who Cassandra was. He'd thought of her as the CEO, the boss, the woman in the corner office who made decisions that affected his life but never really saw him. But she wasn't just that. She was someone who'd lost her parents and built walls around herself and was now trying to figure out how to tear them down. She was lonely and scared and trying to do something good in a world that didn't always reward goodness. She was human, just like him. "I need to talk to Lily," Evan said, "before I decide. This affects her as much as it affects me." "Of course," Cassandra said. "Take whatever time you need. There's no rush." "When would you need an answer?" "There's no deadline. This position doesn't officially exist yet. I'll create it when and if you're ready to fill it." They finished their coffee and talked about smaller things. The best pizza places in Portland, the weird satisfaction of organizing warehouse inventory, the way snow made everything look temporary. Cassandra told him about a disastrous company retreat where she'd gotten lost hiking and had to be rescued by park rangers. And Evan told her about the time Lily had convinced him to dress up as a dinosaur for her school's career day. They laughed, and it felt natural, easy, like they'd been friends for years instead of hours. When they stood to leave, Cassandra pulled out her wallet, but Evan shook his head. "I've got it," he said. "It's the least I can do after you brought Christmas dinner to my apartment." "It was just sandwiches." "It was more than that," Evan said. "You know it was." Cassandra smiled, and there was something warm in it, something grateful. "Thank you, Evan, for the coffee, for considering this, for everything. Thank you for seeing me, Evan said, for thinking I'm capable of more than I think I am. They walked out together into the cold December morning. Cassandra's car was parked right in front, sleek and expensive and exactly what you'd expect a CEO to drive. Evan's was a block away, a 10-year-old Honda with a dent in the passenger door and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. I'll call you, Evan said. After I talk to Lily. Give me a couple days? Take all the time you need, Cassandra said. She hesitated, then added, and Evan, whatever you decide, I meant what I said last night. You're not alone in this. If you need anything, advice, support, just someone to talk to, call me. Please. I will, Evan said, and meant it. He watched her drive away, then walked to his own car. Sitting in the driver's seat, he pulled out his phone and stared at his daughter's contact photo. Lily at the beach last summer, grinning with sand in her hair and joy written all over her face. He wanted to give her that joy all the time, not just in stolen moments between work shifts. He called his mother.
Evan, honey, is everything okay? Yeah, Mom, everything's fine. Is Lily around? She's playing with her cousins. Do you want me to get her? Not yet. I actually wanted to talk to you first about something that happened. He told her everything. The visit from Cassandra, the conversation, the job offer. His mother listened without interrupting, the way she always did when something was important. $75,000, she said when he finished. Evan, that's life-changing money. I know, but what if I can't do it? What if I take this job and fail and end up worse off than I am now? What if you take this job and succeed, his mother countered. What if this is exactly what you've been waiting for and you're too scared to grab it? I'm terrified, Mom. Good. That means it matters. You should be terrified of things that matter. He heard her take a breath. Evan, I've watched you struggle for 18 months. I've watched you work yourself sick trying to provide for Lily while Michelle got to start over like none of it mattered. And I've wanted so badly to fix it for you, but I couldn't. This woman, Cassandra, she's offering you a chance to fix it yourself. Don't let fear talk you out of that. What if Lily needs stability? What if changing jobs right now is the wrong move? What Lily needs is a father who's present and happy, not exhausted and barely holding on. You think she doesn't notice how tired you are? How you fall asleep during her bedtime stories? She notices, sweetheart. She notices everything. Evan felt tears burn behind his eyes. I just want to be enough for her. You are enough. You've always been enough. But you're also allowed to accept help. You're allowed to take an opportunity that makes your life better. You're allowed to stop punishing yourself for a marriage that didn't work out. I'm not punishing myself. Aren't you? You're living in that tiny apartment because you think you don't deserve better. You're working yourself into the ground because you think suffering proves you're a good father. But Evan, being a good father means being healthy and present and showing Lily that it's okay to accept good things when they come. She's watching how you treat yourself. What do you want her to learn? Evan closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the seat. His mother was right. She was always right about these things. Can you put Lily on? He asked. Of course, I love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Mom. There was rustling, then his daughter's voice, bright and clear. Hi, Daddy. Hey, baby girl. What are you up to? We're building a fort out of blankets, and Grammy let us have cookies before lunch, but don't tell her I told you. Evan smiled despite the tightness in his chest. Your secret's safe with me. Hey, Lily, can I ask you something? Uh-huh. How would you feel if Daddy got a new job? One that meant I could be home more, pick you up from school sometimes, have more time to do fun stuff together? Would you still be my daddy? The question hit him like a physical blow. Of course, baby. Always. Why would you ask that? Because Mommy got a new boyfriend, and now she's different. She's still Mommy, but different. I thought maybe if you got a new job, you'd be different too. Evan felt his heart break clean in half. Lily, listen to me. I will never be different about loving you. No job, no person, nothing in the world will ever change that. You are the most important thing in my whole life. Do you understand? Even more important than work? Especially more important than work. Work is just what I do to pay for food in our apartment. But you're why I do everything. So if you got a new job, We could have more time together? Yeah, sweetheart, a lot more time. Then I think you should do it. Because I miss you when you're working all the time. Evan pressed his palm against his eyes, fighting to keep his voice steady. I miss you too, baby, so much. Daddy, are you crying? Just a little, but they're happy tears, I promise. Okay, I have to go now. Uncle Mike is making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Go have fun, baby. I love you. Love you too, Daddy. Bye. The line went dead, and Evan sat in his car in the gray Portland afternoon and let himself cry. Not the desperate, exhausted tears he'd cried so many times over the past 18 months, but something cleaner, something that felt like release. Lily missed him. She wanted more time with him, and someone was offering him a chance to give her that. He wiped his eyes, pulled out his phone, and texted Cassandra. I'd like to say yes. When can we make this official? Her response came almost immediately. How about Monday? Come to my office at 9 a.m. We'll do this right. Evan stared at the message, his heart pounding. This was happening. This was real. He drove home through streets that looked exactly the same but felt completely different. The apartment was still cramped when he walked in, the bills still stacked on the coffee table, the cheap Christmas tree still blinking in the corner. But for the first time since Michelle had left, since his whole life had fallen apart, Evan looked around and saw possibility instead of prison. He thought about Cassandra sitting in her big empty house, surrounded by things that cost money but didn't mean anything. He thought about himself in this small apartment, surrounded by nothing but what mattered. And he realized they'd both been lonely in their own ways, both searching for something that looked like connection. Maybe that's what this was. Two people who'd been drowning separately, figuring out how to help each other float. Evan pulled out his laptop and started making a list. Things that needed to change at Meridian. Systems that were broken. Policies that hurt instead of helped. He wrote until his fingers ached, ideas pouring out of him faster than he could type them. Childcare assistance, flexible scheduling, mental health days that didn't require doctor's notes, emergency funds for employees facing unexpected costs, training programs that didn't happen on unpaid time. He wrote until the winter sun set and the apartment filled with shadows, until the list was pages long and his head was full of plans. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Evan Pierce felt something that had been absent from his life for 18 months. He felt hope. Monday morning arrived with cold rain instead of snow, the kind of persistent Oregon drizzle that turned the city gray and made everything feel slightly more difficult. Evan stood in front of his bathroom mirror at 7:30, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. He'd bought it yesterday at a discount store, along with a new shirt that didn't quite fit right across the shoulders. The ensemble screamed trying too hard, but it was the best he could do on short notice. His hands were shaking. Not obviously, but enough that he had trouble with the tie knot, enough that he had to start over twice before getting it remotely straight. He looked at his reflection and saw a man pretending to be someone he wasn't sure he could become. A warehouse supervisor about to walk into the CEO's office and accept a position that still felt like something he'd imagined. The drive to Meridian's headquarters took 30 minutes through Monday traffic. Evan had been to the building before for mandatory meetings and safety training, but he'd never gone past the ground floor conference rooms. The executive offices were on the 7th floor, a place that existed in theory but felt as distant and inaccessible as another planet. He parked in the visitor lot because he didn't have clearance for employee parking at this building, then sat in his car for 10 minutes trying to calm his racing heart. At 8:55, he walked through the glass doors into a lobby that smelled like expensive coffee and new carpet. The security guard checked his ID, made a phone call, then directed him to the elevators with the efficiency that suggested this was routine. For the guard, maybe it was. For Evan, every step felt momentous. The 7th floor opened onto a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that was probably worth more than Evan's car, abstract art on the walls that he didn't understand but assumed was important. A receptionist who looked like she'd never had a bad hair day smiled at him with professional warmth. Mr. Pierce, Miss Wren is expecting you. Right this way. Evan followed her down a hallway lined with more expensive art and closed office doors with titles stenciled on frosted glass. Chief Financial Officer, Vice President of Operations, Director of Human Resources.
At the end of the hall, double doors stood open to reveal an office that was somehow both impressive and surprisingly understated. Cassandra sat behind a desk that was probably handcrafted from some endangered tree, but the rest of the office was less about showing wealth and more about function. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed with what looked like actual books people had read rather than decorative sets. A sitting area near the windows had comfortable chairs that showed signs of use. The art was still present, but felt chosen by someone with actual taste rather than an interior designer working from a budget. She stood when she saw him, and Evan felt some of his nervousness ease. She was wearing a suit today, back in CEO mode, but her smile was the same one from the coffee shop. Genuine, warm, putting him at ease even as his heart hammered against his ribs. "Evan, thank you for coming. Please, sit." She gestured to the sitting area rather than the formal chairs across from her desk. Evan sat, trying not to think about how much the chair probably cost, and Cassandra settled into the one across from him with 2 folders in her hand. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Terrified," Evan admitted. "But good terrified, I think." "Good terrified is exactly right. If you weren't nervous, I'd worry you didn't understand what you're taking on." She set the folders on the coffee table between them. "Before we make this official, I want to walk you through exactly what this role entails. Not the sanitized HR version, but the real version. Can I be completely honest with you?" "Please." Cassandra leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. "This position is going to be hard. Not because the work itself is impossible, but because you're going to face resistance from people who think caring about employee welfare is weakness. You're going to propose changes that cost money, and I'm going to have to defend those costs to a board that only cares about quarterly returns. You're going to see problems you can't fix immediately, and that's going to be frustrating." "I already see those problems," Evan said. "At least now I'd have the authority to try to fix them." "Exactly, but trying doesn't always mean succeeding. Some things are going to take time. Some things are going to require convincing people who don't want to be convinced. Can you handle that? Can you push for change knowing you might not see results for months or even years?" Evan thought about the past 18 months of his life, showing up every day to a job that barely paid enough to live on, working extra shifts that meant missing time with Lily, choosing between groceries and keeping the heat on. He'd been handling impossible situations with no authority and no support for so long that having those things, even with resistance, felt like a gift. "I can handle it," he said. "As long as I know the effort matters. As long as I know someone's actually listening." "I'm listening," Cassandra said. "That's the most important thing I can promise you. When you tell me something needs to change, I'll listen. I might not always agree, and I might not always be able to implement what you want immediately, but I will always take you seriously. You'll have direct access to me, no going through layers of management. If you need something, you come straight to my office." "Other people are going to hate that." "Let them." Cassandra's expression was fierce. "I didn't become CEO by worrying about what people think. I became CEO by doing what needed to be done, and what needs to be done now is creating a company where people can actually thrive, not just survive." She opened the first folder and pulled out a document. "This is your offer letter. Salary, benefits, everything we discussed. Take your time reading it. If anything seems unclear, or if you want to negotiate any terms, we can do that." Evan took the letter with hands that felt steadier than they had an hour ago. The numbers were all there, exactly as Cassandra had promised. $75,000 annual salary. Full health coverage with a description of benefits that included things he'd never had access to before. Mental health services, prescription coverage, vision and dental with no deductibles. 3 weeks paid vacation that accrued from day one. Sick leave that didn't require a doctor's note. The title Employee Wellness and Operations Liaison with a job description that was both specific and flexible, giving him room to shape the role as needs became clear. At the bottom, a start date. January 2nd, just 1 week away. "This is real," Evan said softly. "It's real," Cassandra confirmed. "And there's one more thing." She opened the second folder and pulled out another document. "This is a discretionary budget of $50,000 for your first quarter. You'll have full authority over how it's spent, as long as it goes toward employee wellness initiatives. Childcare assistance, emergency funds, mental health programs, whatever you determine would make the most impact. You'll report to me on how it's used, but the decisions are yours. Evan stared at the number. $50,000. That was more than he made in a year, and she was putting it under his control to help people who were struggling the way he'd been struggling. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it wisely. Say you'll fight for the people who need it most. Say you'll be honest with me about what's working and what isn't. Cassandra paused. And say you'll take care of yourself too, because I meant what I said about flexible scheduling. If Lily needs you, you're there. If you need a mental health day, you take it. You can't help anyone else if you're running on empty. I've been running on empty for 18 months. I know, that ends now. She met his eyes. This isn't charity, Evan. This is me recognizing value and investing in it. You're going to earn every dollar of this salary by making Meridian a better place. But you're also going to prove that taking care of people isn't just the right thing to do. It's good business. Turnover costs money. Training costs money. Having exhausted, demoralized employees costs money. What you're going to build is going to save this company more than it costs. I genuinely believe that. Evan looked down at the offer letter again, at the signature line, waiting for his name. His whole life could change with one signature. Better pay, better hours, better opportunities for Lily. The chance to actually make a difference instead of just surviving. But also pressure, expectations, the possibility of failure in a much more public way than anything he'd faced before. He thought about what his mother had said. What Lily needs is a father who's present and happy, not exhausted and barely holding on. He thought about Cassandra showing up at his door on Christmas night with sandwiches and honesty, seeing him in a way no one had in years. He thought about Marcus, the struggling new hire he'd helped 3 years ago, who was thriving now because someone had believed in him. Evan picked up the pen Cassandra offered and signed his name. "Welcome to the team," Cassandra said, and her smile was radiant, officially this time. They spent the next 2 hours going over logistics. Cassandra introduced him to her executive assistant, a sharp woman named Patricia, who looked at Evan with frank assessment and then nodded as if he'd passed some invisible test. They toured the 7th floor, and Evan met the other executives with varying degrees of warmth. The CFO was polite but clearly skeptical. The VP of Operations was openly curious. The Director of Human Resources, a man named Kenneth, who looked like he'd never missed a gym session, seemed annoyed that Cassandra had created this position without consulting him. "We'll need to align on messaging," Kenneth said, looking at Evan like he was a problem to be solved. "Employee wellness is technically under HR's purview. We can't have mixed signals about who's responsible for what." "Evan reports directly to me," Cassandra said, her voice pleasant but with an edge of steel. "He'll coordinate with HR when appropriate, but his authority comes from the CEO's office. I'm sure you'll work well together." Kenneth's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course." After Kenneth left, Cassandra turned to Evan. "He's going to be a challenge. He sees anything outside his control as a threat. Don't let him intimidate you." "He doesn't intimidate me," Evan said. "He annoys me. There's a difference." Cassandra laughed, surprised and genuine. "Good. Annoyed is easier to work with than intimidated." They continued the tour. Evan's office was 3 doors down from Cassandra's, smaller, but still larger than any personal space he'd ever had at work. It had a window overlooking the city, a desk that looked sturdy and functional, and empty bookshelves waiting to be filled. The computer was new, the chair was ergonomic, and there was a small couch along one wall that Cassandra explained was standard for offices at this level. "For when you need to think, or when you're working late and need a break," she said. "Though I'm serious about the flexible hours, I don't want you working late unless it's absolutely necessary." "Old habits," Evan said. "I'm used to being here at night." "Well, get used to being home at night. That's part of the point." Patricia came in with a laptop, a phone, and a stack of paperwork. "HR needs these forms by end of day," she said, handing Evan the stack. "And it will have your email and system access set up by this afternoon. Ms. Wren, you have a call in 10 minutes. "Thank you, Patricia." Cassandra turned to Evan. "I have meetings for the rest of the day, but you're free to get settled, start familiarizing yourself with the systems. Maybe walk through the warehouses if you want. Your ID badge will give you access to all facilities now." Evan looked at the badge Patricia handed him. Same photo from his warehouse supervisor ID, but the title underneath had changed. Employee Wellness and Operations Liaison. It felt surreal. Go easy on yourself today, Cassandra said. This is a lot to process. If you need anything, Patricia knows how to reach me. After she left, Evan sat at his new desk and stared at the empty office. Through the window, he could see Portland stretched out below, the river cutting through the city, bridges connecting one side to the other. From up here, everything looked manageable, organized, purposeful. He wondered if that's how Cassandra saw the company from her office, all the pieces fitting together, all the problems solvable with enough perspective. But Evan knew what it looked like from the ground floor. He'd spent years down there watching good people struggle, watching systems fail the very people they were supposed to support. And now he had the chance to change that, to be the bridge between the seventh floor view and the reality of the warehouse. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. How did it go? Evan took a photo of his new office and sent it with a message. I got the job. Her response was immediate. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. When do you tell Lily? Evan checked the time. Lily would be back from Seattle tomorrow. He'd pick her up after school, take her for ice cream, tell her everything was about to change for the better. Tomorrow, he texted back. I want to tell her in person. He spent the afternoon reading through employee handbooks, benefit descriptions, company policies. The language was all corporate and sanitized, talking about competitive compensation and comprehensive coverage. But between the lines, Evan could see the gaps. Parental leave was technically offered, but unpaid. Health insurance had deductibles that would cripple someone making minimum wage. Sick days were available, but required doctor's notes, which meant people came to work ill because they couldn't afford the doctor visit to get the note. He started a new document on his laptop and began making notes. Not angry accusations, but clear observations backed by research. He pulled statistics on employee turnover, on the cost of training replacements, on productivity loss from presenteeism, people showing up sick because they couldn't afford not to. He outlined a proposal for paid parental leave, for reducing health insurance deductibles, for eliminating the doctor's note requirement for short-term illness. He worked until 6, then realized with a start that he'd just worked through what would normally be dinner break on a warehouse shift. Except this wasn't the warehouse, this was his office, and he could leave whenever he wanted. The strangeness of that freedom made him laugh out loud. He was packing up when Cassandra appeared in his doorway. She'd changed out of her suit jacket, looked tired but satisfied. Still here? She asked. Just leaving? Got caught up in research. Find anything interesting? A lot of things that need to change. Evan gestured to his computer. I started drafting some proposals. Nothing formal yet, just ideas. Can I see? Evan hesitated, then turned the laptop so she could see. Cassandra leaned against his desk, reading through his notes with focused attention. When she finished, she was smiling. This is exactly what I needed, she said. Clear, specific, backed by data. When can you have a formal proposal ready? Give me a week. I want to talk to people first, get a sense of what would actually help versus what sounds good on paper. Smart. And Evan? She waited until he looked at her. Thank you for taking this seriously, for already thinking about impact instead of just accepting the title. I don't know how to not take it seriously, Evan said. This is people's lives. I know, that's why you're the right person for this. They walked to the elevator together, rode down in comfortable silence. In the parking lot, Cassandra's expensive car was parked next to Evan's dented Honda, the contrast almost comical. That's me, Evan said, pointing to the Honda with a self-deprecating smile. Good car, Cassandra said. Reliable. It breaks down constantly. But you fix it, and it keeps going. That's the definition of reliable. Evan laughed. Is that CEO wisdom? Finding the positive spin in everything? No, that's someone who respects practicality over appearance. She unlocked her car. Drive safe, Evan. See you tomorrow. Evan drove home through evening traffic, rain still falling steadily, and felt the weight of the day settling over him. Exhaustion, yes, but also exhilaration. Fear and hope mixing together into something he couldn't quite name. He stopped at the grocery store and bought actual groceries instead of ramen and canned soup. He bought fresh vegetables and chicken and ingredients for a real meal. The total was more than he usually spent, but he had a new job starting in a week. A salary that would mean he didn't have to choose between eating well and paying rent. Back at the apartment, he cooked for the first time in months. Nothing fancy, just chicken and rice and roasted vegetables, but it felt like an accomplishment. He ate at his small table instead of on the couch, and the simple act of sitting down for a proper meal felt like reclaiming something he'd lost. After dinner, he called Lily. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright with excitement about coming home tomorrow. And Grammy said we can stop for French fries on the way home from the airport, but she said I have to ask you if it's okay because it's your day with me. French fries sound perfect, Evan said. Hey, baby girl, I have some news, some really good news. What is it? Daddy got a new job, a really good one that means I can be home more, pick you up from school sometimes, have more time to spend with you. There was a pause, and Evan could almost hear her thinking, does that mean we can go to the zoo? You always say we'll go, but then you have to work. The simple request broke his heart and mended it at the same time. Yeah, baby, we can go to the zoo. We can go lots of places. I'm going to have so much more time with you. Will you be happy? Lily asked, and the question was so direct, so perceptive that Evan felt tears sting his eyes. I think so, sweetheart. I think I'm going to be a lot happier. Good. Because you seem sad sometimes. I don't like when you're sad. I know, baby. I'm sorry about that. Things are going to be better now. I promise. Okay, Daddy, I have to go. Grammy's making hot chocolate, and she said if I don't come now, I don't get marshmallows. Go get your marshmallows. I'll see you tomorrow. Love you, Daddy. Love you more. After they hung up, Evan sat in his quiet apartment and let himself feel everything. The relief, the fear, the gratitude, the weight of responsibility. Cassandra had given him an opportunity that most people never got, a chance to start over, to build something better, to prove that caring about people could coexist with running a successful business. But she'd also given him something else. She'd seen him when he felt invisible. She'd shown up when he was alone. She'd offered him not just a job, but belief, the kind of fundamental faith in his capability that he'd forgotten anyone could have. And in return, he was going to build something that mattered, something that would help people like Marcus, like the single parents working double shifts, like everyone who'd ever felt trapped by a system that valued profit over humanity. He opened his laptop and kept working on his proposals. Hours passed. The rain kept falling. And for the first time in 18 months, Evan Pierce worked late, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because what he was building felt like hope taking shape on a screen, one policy proposal at a time. The proposal sat on Cassandra's desk 3 days later, printed and bound, the result of 72 hours of research, interviews, and careful analysis. Evan had spent his last days at the warehouse talking to people, really listening to what they needed instead of what he assumed they needed. He'd sat in the break room during shift changes, bought coffee for tired workers, asked questions that started with what would actually help and ended with honest answers that sometimes surprised him. Marcus, the kid he'd trained 3 years ago, had been first on his list. They'd met at a diner near the warehouse, and Marcus had brought his girlfriend, a nursing student working nights to pay tuition while raising a 2-year-old. You want to know what would actually help? Marcus had said, stirring sugar into coffee he probably couldn't afford. Childcare. My girl pays $800 a month for daycare, and half the time she's choosing between that and her textbooks. If Meridian had even partial childcare assistance, it would change everything. The girlfriend, Sarah, had nodded emphatically. And mental health support that doesn't require going through insurance. I had a panic attack last semester, needed to talk to someone, but the copay was $60. I worked that shift anyway because $60 was groceries. Evan had written it all down. Then he'd talked to single parents, to workers caring for aging relatives, to people dealing with chronic illnesses who came to work anyway because missing a shift meant missing rent. He talked to the guy who'd worked at Meridian for 15 years and still couldn't afford to fix his broken tooth. He talked to the woman who kept extra clothes in her locker because she was technically homeless, sleeping in her car between shifts. He talked to the young man who'd stopped taking his depression medication because the prescription cost more than he made in a day. Every conversation had broken his heart a little more. Every story had confirmed what he already knew but now had data to support. People weren't failing because they were lazy or irresponsible. They were drowning because the system was designed to let them drown. The proposal he'd written reflected all of it, 50 pages of research, testimonials, cost-benefit analysis, and specific recommendations. Subsidized childcare partnerships with local facilities. On-site mental health counseling with no copay. Emergency assistance fund for unexpected costs. Dental coverage that was actually comprehensive. Flexible scheduling that didn't require doctor's notes or manager approval. Paid parental leave for all employees regardless of tenure. Transportation assistance for workers without reliable vehicles. Every recommendation included projected costs, expected benefits, and comparison data from companies that had implemented similar programs. Evan had worked until 2 a.m. every night, fueled by coffee and determination, making sure every claim was defensible, every number accurate. Now Cassandra was reading it, her expression focused and unreadable. Evan sat across from her in the sitting area of her office, trying not to fidget, trying not to second-guess every word he'd written. Outside the windows, January rain fell steadily, turning Portland into a watercolor painting of grays and greens. Cassandra turned a page, then another. She made notes in the margins, nodding occasionally, her pen moving quickly. Evan watched her read about Sarah's panic attack, about the man with the broken tooth, about the woman sleeping in her car. He watched her expression shift from professional assessment to something harder, something that looked like anger. Finally, she set the proposal down and looked at him. "This is exceptional work," she said. "Thorough, well-researched, compelling. But Evan, do you realize what you're asking for?" "I'm asking for basic human dignity," Evan said, "for people to be able to work without choosing between health and housing. You're asking for approximately $800,000 in the first year, recurring costs that will increase annually as we grow. I'm asking for $800,000 to save approximately $2 million in turnover costs, training expenses, and lost productivity." Evan leaned forward. "Every person I interviewed mentioned at least one coworker who'd quit in the past year because the job wasn't sustainable. Your turnover rate is 37% annually. Industry average is 22%. You're losing people at almost double the rate you should be, and every person who leaves costs roughly 60% of their annual salary to replace." You did the math. I did all the math. And the math says that investing in people saves money. Maybe not this quarter or even this year, but long term, this makes financial sense. Cassandra picked up the proposal again, flipped to a page she'd marked. "You want to partner with 4 local childcare centers, subsidize 50% of costs for any employee making under $50,000 annually. Childcare is the biggest barrier for working parents. It's why your workforce is disproportionately single people or employees whose kids are grown. You're missing out on talented workers because they can't afford to take a job that doesn't help with childcare. You want on-site mental health counseling 3 days a week. Mental health is healthcare. Treating it as less important than physical health is why people like Sarah work through panic attacks instead of getting help. You want productive employees? Give them access to the support they need. You want an emergency assistance fund of $25,000 per quarter. Because emergencies happen. Cars break down, kids get sick, apartments flood. And when someone is one emergency away from homelessness, they're not focused at work. They're terrified and distracted and probably looking for a job that pays better even if it treats them worse. Cassandra set the proposal down again, her expression thoughtful. "You've thought this through." "I've lived this through," Evan corrected. "Every problem in that proposal is something I've experienced or watched someone else experience. I know what it's like to choose between fixing my car and feeding my daughter. I know what it's like to work while sick because I couldn't afford the doctor visit for a sick note. I know what it's like to be exhausted and scared and feel like nobody in power cares whether you survive. And now you're in power." The words hit Evan hard. He'd never thought of himself that way, never considered that accepting this position meant becoming one of the people who made decisions that affected lives. The realization was both empowering and terrifying. "So what do I do with it?" he asked quietly. Cassandra stood, walked to the window, looked out at the rain-soaked city. "You push as hard as you can. You fight for every dollar, every policy change, every small victory, and you accept that you won't win every battle." "Which battles won't I win?" She turned to face him. "The board is going to push back on the parental leave. They'll say it's too generous, that other companies don't offer it, that we can't afford to be that progressive. Kenneth in HR is going to fight the flexible scheduling because he thinks it undermines management authority. The CFO is going to question every dollar of the emergency fund because it doesn't generate measurable ROI. But you support it. I support all of it. But I also have to be strategic about how we implement. If I push everything at once, they'll reject it all. But if we prioritize, if we phase implementation, if we can show early wins that prove the concept, then we can expand. Evan felt frustration rise in his chest. So we choose which people to help and which people to make wait. We choose how to help the most people in the long run. It's not fair and it's not perfect, but it's how change happens in organizations this size. Cassandra came back to sit across from him. I want to start with 3 things: the Emergency Assistance Fund, the mental health counseling, and the child care subsidy. Those 3 will cost about $300,000 in year 1, which I can defend to the board as a pilot program. We implement, we track metrics, we demonstrate impact. Then we expand. What about the rest? The rest we build toward. Flexible scheduling we can implement in phases, starting with your team and expanding as we prove it doesn't hurt productivity. Paid parental leave we position as a retention tool in phase in over 2 years. Dental coverage we negotiate during our next insurance renewal. She met his eyes. This is going to take time, Evan. Longer than either of us wants, but it will happen. Evan wanted to argue, wanted to demand that they implement everything immediately, that they stop making people wait for basic dignity. But he could see the calculation in Cassandra's expression, the strategic thinking that had made her successful. She wasn't being cruel, she was being realistic. How long? He asked. Full implementation? 3 years? Maybe 4. But people will start seeing benefits within months. The emergency fund launches next week. Mental health counseling starts February 1st. Childcare subsidy by March. That's hundreds of employees whose lives improve while we work on the rest. And the people we can't help yet? We're honest with them. We tell them what we're building and when it's coming. We give them hope with a timeline instead of empty promises. Cassandra leaned forward. Evan, I know you want to fix everything immediately. I know you see suffering and want to eliminate it right now. But sustainable change takes patience. If we move too fast, if we burn through budget or political capital, we'll get shut down and help no one. Evan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of compromise. I hate that you're right. So do I, Cassandra said softly. Welcome to leadership. It's making the best possible decision when all the options are imperfect. They spent the next hour refining the proposal, deciding what to present to the board and how to frame it. Cassandra showed him how to translate human need into business language, how to make compassion sound like strategy. It felt dishonest at first, this translation of suffering into metrics, but Evan gradually understood the necessity. The board didn't care about Sarah's panic attack in abstract terms, but they cared about retention and productivity and competitive advantage. You're learning, Cassandra said when they finished, how to speak their language without losing sight of why it matters. It feels manipulative. It's practical. You can have the purest intentions in the world, but if you can't convince people with power to support you, those intentions accomplish nothing. This is how we get things done. Patricia knocked on the door, stuck her head in. The board presentation is in an hour, conference room A. They're expecting both of you. Evan felt his stomach drop. Both of us? You wrote the proposal, Cassandra said. You present it. I'll be there to support and clarify, but this is your work. They need to hear it from you. I've never presented to a board before. You've presented to warehouse teams, to supervisors, to people who didn't want to listen but needed to hear what you had to say. This is the same thing, just in suits. She smiled. And Evan, be yourself. Don't try to sound corporate or rehearsed. Tell them what you told me about why this matters. The conference room was on the 8th floor, all glass walls and leather chairs, and a table that could seat 20 people comfortably. When Evan walked in behind Cassandra, 7 board members were already seated, ranging in age from mid-40s to 70s, representing a diversity of backgrounds, but a unity of skeptical expressions. Cassandra made introductions. The board chair was a silver-haired woman named Margaret, who'd made her fortune in tech and retired to advisory roles. The CFO was there, looking as skeptical as Evan expected. The others were investors, business leaders, people whose primary concern was whether Meridian remained profitable. Evan has prepared a proposal for our employee wellness initiative, Cassandra said. I've reviewed it thoroughly and believe it represents a significant opportunity for Meridian. Evan, please proceed. Evan stood at the head of the table, his laptop connected to the screen behind him, his proposal printed for everyone present. His hands were shaking again, but he took a breath and started. 3 years ago, I helped train a new employee named Marcus who was struggling to learn our inventory system. I spent extra time with him, unpaid, because I could see he was trying and just needed support. Today, Marcus is one of our most reliable workers, has been promoted twice, and is training new employees himself. The question I want you to consider is this: how many Marcuses have we lost because nobody took the time to invest in them? He walked them through the proposal, section by section. He showed them the turnover statistics, the cost calculations, the comparison data. He told them about Sarah and her panic attack, about the man with the broken tooth, about the woman sleeping in her car. He didn't sanitize the stories or make them palatable. He made the board look at the reality of what minimum wage plus no support actually meant. You're asking for significant investment with uncertain returns, the CFO said when Evan finished. How do we measure success? Retention rates, productivity metrics, employee satisfaction scores, reduction in workers' compensation claims, decrease in absenteeism, Evan listed, all quantifiable, all trackable. But also we measure how many people can afford to stay in their homes, how many kids get to see their parents instead of being raised by exhausted strangers, how many workers don't have to choose between health and survival. Those aren't business metrics, another board member said. No, Evan agreed. They're human metrics. And if we only care about business metrics, we're going to keep losing good people to companies that understand that humans are the business. Margaret, the board chair, had been quiet throughout the presentation. Now she spoke. Mr. Pierce, you're asking us to fundamentally change how we think about employee compensation, to view benefits not as expenses but as investments. Yes, Evan said simply. And you believe this will make Meridian more competitive? I believe this will make Meridian the kind of place people want to work, the kind of place they're loyal to because the company is loyal to them first. Right now, we're competing on salary alone, and there's always someone willing to pay 50 cents more per hour. But if we compete on quality of life, on actual support, on treating people like they matter, we become irreplaceable. That's idealistic, the CFO said. That's strategic, Cassandra cut in. Costco built their entire business model on this philosophy. They pay above market rate, offer excellent benefits, and have a turnover rate that's 1/6 of the industry average. Their employees are productive, loyal, and their customer service is exceptional because people who are treated well treat others well. We're not inventing a new model. We're adopting a proven one. The board members conferred quietly among themselves. Evan stood there, trying not to show how nervous he was, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. Cassandra caught his eye and nodded slightly, a gesture of support that steadied him. Finally, Margaret spoke. We'll approve the pilot program as outlined. The emergency fund, mental health counseling, and child care subsidy. $300,000 for year 1, with quarterly reviews to assess impact. If metrics support expansion, we'll consider additional investment. That's all I'm asking, Evan said. A chance to prove it works. Then don't waste it, Margaret said, but her expression was warmer than her words. I appreciate your passion, Mr. Pierce. This company could use more people who care as much as you do. The meeting adjourned. Evan felt like he'd run a marathon, his shirt damp with sweat, his legs shaky with adrenaline. Cassandra walked him back to his office, her hand briefly on his shoulder. You did well, she said. Better than well. You made them see people instead of numbers. I thought the CFO was going to shut it down completely. He wanted to, but Margaret likes you, Sama, and she has the most influence on that board. You won her over by being honest instead of polished. I don't know how to be polished. Good. Don't learn. Cassandra smiled. Take the rest of the day. You've earned it. We'll start implementation planning tomorrow. Evan went to his office but couldn't sit still. The energy from the presentation was still coursing through him, the victory of getting approval mixed with frustration that it wasn't everything, wasn't immediate, wasn't enough. He texted Marcus. Got approval for some changes. Can we talk? The response came quickly. Break room at 3? Evan drove to the warehouse, his old workplace that felt both familiar and foreign now. The break room smelled the same, burnt coffee and microwaved food, but his perspective had shifted. He saw the uncomfortable chairs, the flickering fluorescent lights, the water cooler that had been broken for months. Things he'd accepted as normal now looked like failures of care. Marcus came in right at 3, still wearing his work vest, looking tired but greeting Evan with genuine warmth. "Hey man, heard you got the fancy office upstairs, CEO's pet now?" "Something like that," Evan said. "Sit down. I want to tell you what's coming." He explained the pilot program, the emergency fund that would launch next week, the mental health counseling starting February, the childcare subsidy coming in March. He watched Marcus's expression shift from skeptical to hopeful to almost tearful. "You're serious? The childcare thing is real?" 50% subsidy for anyone making under $50,000. Sarah qualifies. "That's $400 a month back in our pocket. That's—" Marcus stopped, composed himself. "That's rent, man. That's the difference between making it and not making it." "I know," Evan said. "That's why we're doing it." "Who's we?" "You've been at that job for less than a week." "Me and Cassandra Wren, the CEO. She's the one making this happen." Marcus looked at him carefully. "She knows what it's like down here? What it's really like?" "She's learning, and she's listening. That's the important part." They talked for another hour, Marcus asking questions, Evan explaining timelines and requirements, and how to access the programs when they launched. Other workers filtered in and out, and word spread quickly. By the time Evan left, a small crowd had gathered, people asking about the changes, about whether they were real, about when they could apply. "Next week," Evan kept saying. "The emergency fund launches next week. If you need it, come talk to me." Driving back to his apartment, Evan felt the weight of those conversations. Every question had been tinged with disbelief, with the caution of people who'd been disappointed too many times to trust easily. He had 1 week to prove this was real, to show that the company could actually care about more than profit margins. His phone rang. Lily's contact photo filled the screen, her gap-toothed smile from last summer, ice cream on her chin. "Hey, baby girl." "Daddy, guess what happened at school today?" "What happened?" "We got to dissect owl pellets. It was so gross and so cool. We found tiny mouse bones and everything." Evan smiled, the simple joy in her voice washing over him like warm water. "That sounds amazing. Did you find a skull?" "2 skulls. Miss Peterson said I could keep one if I cleaned it properly. Can we do that this weekend?" "Absolutely. We can look up how to do it right." "And Daddy, can we also go to the zoo? You said we could go now that you have more time." "How about Saturday? Just you and me?" The squeal that came through the phone was worth every difficult board meeting, every compromise, every moment of doubt. This was why it mattered. Not the metrics or the business case, but the ability to say yes to his daughter without mental calculations about whether he could afford the admission price or the gas to get there. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, baby, more than anything." After hanging up, Evan sat in his car outside his apartment and looked at the building that had felt like a prison for 18 months. It still wasn't much, still cramped, still old, still full of someone else's furniture. But it felt different now. Less like an ending and more like a transition, a place he was passing through on the way to something better. Inside, he made dinner and ate while reviewing his notes for the emergency fund launch. The criteria needed to be clear but compassionate. The application process needed to be simple enough that people in crisis could navigate it. The timeline needed to be fast because emergencies didn't wait for bureaucracy. He worked until Lily called to say goodnight, then worked a little longer. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to get it right. Because somewhere out there, someone was choosing between rent and food, between medicine and utilities, between surviving and drowning. And starting next week, Evan would have the power to throw them a rope. The apartment was quiet when he finally closed his laptop. The kind of quiet that used to feel oppressive, but now felt peaceful. Evan looked at the Christmas tree, still up in the corner, even though January was half over, its lights blinking steadily in the dark. He thought about Cassandra showing up on Christmas night with sandwiches and honesty. He thought about how much had changed in less than 3 weeks.
He thought about the look on Marcus's face when he'd heard about the childcare subsidy, the hope breaking through years of learned disappointment. And he thought about Saturday, taking Lily to the zoo, finally having time to just be her father without the constant pressure of survival crushing every moment. Evan turned off the lights and went to bed feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not just hope, which was abstract and uncertain, but something more concrete. He felt capable. Like maybe, just maybe, he could actually do this. Could help people, could make a difference, could be the father Lily deserved and the person Cassandra believed he was. Tomorrow he'd finalize the emergency fund criteria. He'd meet with HR about the mental health counseling. He'd start building the systems that would change lives. But tonight, he let himself rest. Let himself believe that good things were possible. Let himself imagine a future where work and life weren't enemies but partners, where survival wasn't the ceiling but the floor, where people like Sarah and Marcus and the woman sleeping in her car could finally breathe. The rain kept falling outside, washing Portland clean, and Evan fell asleep to the sound of it, dreamless and deep. The sleep of someone who'd found purpose after wandering lost for too long. The emergency fund went live on a Tuesday morning in late January, and by noon Evan had 17 applications on his desk. By the end of the week, 43. Each one was a story of things breaking down: cars, health, housing, the fragile infrastructure of lives held together with duct tape and determination. Evan read every application himself, his heart breaking a little more with each one. A single mother whose car transmission had failed and couldn't afford the $1,200 repair needed to get to work. Approved within an hour, check issued same day. A warehouse worker whose son had been hospitalized with pneumonia, facing a $3,000 bill even with insurance. Approved, with a note to follow up about whether the company's health coverage needed improvement. The woman Evan had heard about who'd been sleeping in her car. She needed first and last month's rent for an apartment, $2,400 total. Evan approved it and added her to the list for the mental health counseling that would start next week. Each approval felt like a small victory and a massive reminder of how broken the system was. These weren't unusual circumstances. These were normal emergencies that happened to everyone eventually, but for people living paycheck to paycheck, normal emergencies became catastrophic crises. Marcus stopped by Evan's office on Friday afternoon, Sarah with him, holding their 2-year-old daughter, Emma. The little girl had Cheerios stuck to her shirt and chocolate on her face, completely unconcerned with the professional environment around her. "We got approved for the childcare subsidy," Sarah said, and there were tears in her eyes. $400 a month. I can keep taking classes. I can actually finish my degree. "That's what it's for," Evan said, coming around his desk to crouch down at Emma's level. "Hey there, kiddo. What's your favorite snack?" "Goldfish," Emma announced proudly. "Good choice. Very sophisticated." Sarah laughed through her tears. I need you to know what this means. It's not just the money. It's knowing someone actually cares whether we make it or not. That's worth more than you realize." "I realize," Evan said quietly. "Believe me, I realize." After they left, Evan stood at his window looking down at the parking lot where Sarah was buckling Emma into a car seat that had seen better days. He thought about all the parents out there right now making impossible choices, all the kids who deserved better than exhausted parents and constant stress. The programs he'd launched would help some of them, but some wasn't enough. Some was just a start. His phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra. "My office when you have a minute?" Evan found her at her desk, surrounded by spreadsheets and reports, reading glasses perched on her nose in a way that made her look more approachable than her usual CEO armor allowed. She looked up when he entered and smiled. "Close the door, please." Evan did, suddenly nervous. "Is something wrong?" "The opposite, actually. I've been reviewing the metrics from your first month. 17 emergency fund disbursements totaling $38,000. 43 applications for childcare subsidy, 31 approved so far. Mental health counseling has had 62 appointments in 2 weeks. Employee satisfaction scores are up 11%. Turnover is down for the first time in 18 months. That's good, right? That's exceptional." Cassandra set down the report. "The board wanted proof of concept. You've given them that and more. Margaret called me this morning. She wants to accelerate the timeline on the full proposal." Evan felt his heart rate spike. "Accelerate how?"
Full implementation within 18 months instead of 3 years. Paid parental leave starting July. Comprehensive dental coverage at the next renewal in September. Flexible scheduling, expanding to all departments by end of year, she paused. And a budget increase for your department. They're authorizing another position, someone to help you manage the programs. I don't know what to say. Say you'll hire someone good, someone who understands what we're building. I know exactly who to hire, Evan said, thinking of Sarah. A nursing student who understood healthcare needs, who'd lived the struggle, who could bring perspective he didn't have. They spent the next hour planning the expansion. Cassandra showed him budget projections, timeline proposals, departmental rollout strategies. It was overwhelming and exhilarating, seeing the scope of what they were building. Not just band-aids on broken systems, but actual structural change. There's something else, Cassandra said as they wrapped up. Personal, not professional. Can I ask you something? Of course. How's Lily? Are you getting more time with her? Evan smiled, the kind of genuine smile that came from thinking about his daughter. Last Saturday, we spent 5 hours at the zoo. 5 hours. I picked her up from school twice this week. We're cooking dinner together instead of me microwaving something while she does homework alone. It's everything I wanted. Good. That's what this was supposed to accomplish. It's accomplishing more than that, though. She's happier, I'm happier, and she's starting to talk about the future again instead of just surviving the present. Last night she told me she wants to be a paleontologist when she grows up, and we spent an hour researching what classes she'd need to take. 6 months ago, I couldn't think past the next rent payment. Now we're planning for college. Cassandra's expression softened. That's the real metric. Not satisfaction scores or turnover rates, but whether people can imagine a future. Yeah, Evan agreed. Exactly that. The winter stretched into spring and the programs grew. Sarah accepted the position as Evan's assistant and threw herself into the work with fierce dedication. Together they refined the processes, expanded the support systems, tracked outcomes. The mental health counseling added a second therapist, then a third. The emergency fund helped over 100 employees in its first quarter. The childcare subsidy changed lives. But it wasn't all smooth. Kenneth and HR continued to resist the flexible scheduling, arguing it would create accountability problems. Some managers pushed back on employees taking mental health days, questioning whether the need was legitimate. The CFO scrutinized every expense, demanding justification for costs he considered soft. Evan learned to fight these battles with data instead of emotion. He showed Kenneth that flexible scheduling actually improved productivity by 17% because people weren't distracted by childcare crises or medical appointments. He presented managers with retention statistics proving that supporting mental health reduced long-term absences. He demonstrated to the CFO that every dollar spent on employee support saved $3 in turnover and training costs. He learned to translate human need into business language without losing sight of why it mattered. It was exhausting and frustrating and sometimes felt like speaking 2 languages simultaneously, but it worked. Slowly, grudgingly, resistance turned to acceptance, turned to something close to support. Cassandra was there through all of it, backing him in meetings, running interference with difficult board members, celebrating victories, and strategizing around defeats. They developed a rhythm, a partnership built on shared values and complementary strengths. She understood the business side, the politics, the careful navigation required to change an organization from within. He understood the human side, the reality of struggle, the difference between policies that looked good on paper and programs that actually helped. They had lunch together most Fridays, not to talk about work, but to remember why the work mattered. Cassandra told him about her parents, about the loneliness of success, about learning to measure worth by something other than profit. Evan told her about Lily's latest obsessions, about the small joys of having time to be a parent, about rebuilding a life he'd thought was permanently broken. One Friday in April, sitting in a small restaurant near the office, Cassandra set down her fork and looked at him seriously. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to hear it as a friend, not as your boss." Evan felt anxiety spike. "Okay, Christmas night, when I showed up at your apartment with sandwiches, I was in a very dark place. Not suicidal, but close to it. I'd spent the entire day alone in a house that felt like a mausoleum, surrounded by everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. I was thinking about selling the company, moving somewhere else, starting over as if geography could fix what was broken.
Cassandra, let me finish. I drove to your apartment because I'd heard you were alone, and I thought maybe helping someone else would make me feel less empty. But what happened was you helped me. You let me in when you had every reason not to. You were honest about your struggles instead of pretending everything was fine. You reminded me what it felt like to have an actual human connection instead of a transaction. She paused. You saved my life that night. I need you to know that. Evan felt his throat tighten. I didn't do anything except let you sit on my couch. You saw me as a person instead of a title. You treated me with kindness when I showed up uninvited on Christmas night because I couldn't stand my own company. That's not nothing, Evan. That's everything. You saw me too, Evan said. You saw a warehouse supervisor who was barely holding it together, and you believed I could be more. You gave me an opportunity that changed my entire life. We saved each other, Cassandra said simply. And I think we're still saving each other, in smaller ways, every day. That's what I wanted to tell you, that I'm grateful. Not for your work, though that's exceptional, but for your friendship. For reminding me that success without connection is just expensive loneliness. Evan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you for knocking on my door, for bringing sandwiches, for seeing me. Thank you for opening it. They finished lunch talking about lighter things, but the conversation stayed with Evan. He'd spent so long thinking about what Cassandra had given him, the job, the salary, the opportunity, that he hadn't fully considered what he'd given her. Not just labor or expertise, but companionship. The simple gift of being seen and valued for who she was, rather than what she could provide. Summer came, and with it the implementation of paid parental leave. 3 employees took advantage of it in the first month. 2 new fathers and a mother returning from maternity leave. Evan made sure flowers were delivered to each home, along with a personal note congratulating them and reminding them they had the full support of the company. It was a small gesture, but the thank you messages he received in return were effusive. Nobody's ever done anything like this, one of the new fathers wrote. I get to spend the first 6 weeks with my daughter because you fought for this policy. She'll never remember it, but I will. Thank you. Evan showed the message to Cassandra, who read it with suspiciously bright eyes. That's why we do this, she said. Right there. That's the whole reason. By August, the company culture had shifted noticeably. People smiled more in the hallways. The break rooms felt less like holding cells and more like actual break spaces. Employees started referring to Meridian as a good place to work, not just a place that paid the bills. Recruitment became easier. Retention continued to improve. Kenneth in HR, who'd fought Evan on almost everything, stopped by his office one afternoon looking uncharacteristically humble. I owe you an apology, Kenneth said. I thought all this wellness stuff was soft, feel-good nonsense that would hurt the bottom line. I was wrong. Productivity is up, turnover is down, and people actually seem to give a damn about their work. So, I'm sorry for being an obstacle. Apology accepted, Evan said, and I appreciate you saying it. I'd like to collaborate moving forward instead of fighting. You clearly know what you're doing. I know what it's like to struggle, Evan corrected. That's different from knowing what I'm doing, but I'm figuring it out. Kenneth smiled, a real smile instead of his usual corporate mask. Aren't we all? In September, Lily started 3rd grade. Evan was there for the first day of school, took her picture on the front steps, walked her to her classroom. Other parents recognized him from previous school events he'd actually been able to attend, waved hello, invited him to a parent meetup at a coffee shop. Evan went, still feeling like an imposter among parents who seemed to have their lives together, but gradually realizing he was one of them now. Not perfect, not without struggles, but present, stable, building a life instead of just surviving one. October brought the annual review period. Cassandra called Evan to her office on a Friday afternoon, the Portland skyline behind her turning gold with autumn light. Sit down, she said. We need to talk about your performance. Evan sat, nervous, despite knowing the programs were successful. Cassandra slid a folder across the desk. Your metrics are exceptional. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. Turnover is down 42% from last year. The wellness programs have saved the company approximately $1.6 million in reduced turnover and increased productivity.
You've exceeded every goal we set. Thank you. Which is why the board has approved a 20% salary increase and a promotion. You're now Director of Employee Wellness and Operations with expanded authority and a larger team. She paused. You've earned this, Evan, not just through hard work, but through genuinely caring about people in a way that most executives forget how to do. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing exactly what you're doing. Keep seeing people instead of numbers. Keep fighting for dignity and support. Keep being the person who'd help a struggling new hire even when nobody's watching. I can do that, Evan said. That's the easy part. That evening, he took Lily to dinner to celebrate. They went to a restaurant nice enough to require reservations, the kind of place Evan wouldn't have even considered a year ago. Lily ordered pasta and told him about her science project on volcanoes, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. And Ms. Rodriguez said mine was the most creative in the class. I made it erupt with baking soda and vinegar, but I also added food coloring so the lava looked real. That's amazing, baby girl. I'm so proud of you. Are you proud of you, Daddy? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? You're always saying you're proud of me, but are you proud of you? For your new job and helping people and being home more? Evan felt emotion well up in his chest. Yeah, sweetheart. I think I am. I think I'm proud of both of us. Good, because you're the best daddy ever, and I want you to know that. Evan reached across the table and took her small hand in his. You're the best daughter ever, and everything good in my life is because I want to be the dad you deserve. You already are, Daddy. They ate their fancy dinner and shared a dessert that was too expensive and absolutely worth it. Walking back to the car, Lily's hand in his, Evan looked up at the October stars and felt something he'd been missing for years. Not just contentment, but genuine happiness. The kind that came from knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. November arrived with rain and shorter days, and Evan found himself thinking about the previous Christmas. About sitting in his cramped apartment alone, feeling like he'd hit bottom with no way back up. About Cassandra's unexpected knock, the sandwiches, the hours of conversation that had changed everything. He called her on a Tuesday afternoon. Do you have plans for Christmas this year? Not yet. Why? I was thinking Lily and I would cook dinner. Nothing fancy, but real food made with care. I'd like you to join us. Not as my boss, just as someone who's become important to us, if that's not too weird. There was a long pause, then Cassandra's voice, thick with emotion. I'd love that. Thank you for asking. Thank you for knocking on my door last year, for seeing me, for changing my life. We changed each other's lives, Cassandra said. That's what happens when people actually let each other in. December came, and with it the one-year anniversary of Evan's new position. Sarah had organized a celebration in the break room of Warehouse C, the place where Evan had spent years feeling invisible. But the break room was different now. New chairs, better coffee maker, a bulletin board showing photos from company events and employee appreciation notes. Marcus stood up to speak, Sarah beside him, Emma toddling around between the tables. A year ago, Evan told me about changes that were coming. I didn't believe him. I'd heard promises before from people who didn't follow through, but everything he said would happen, happened. The childcare subsidy means Sarah finishes her nursing degree in May. The emergency fund helped my mom when her furnace broke. The mental health counseling helped me work through some stuff I'd been carrying for years. He looked directly at Evan. You didn't just change company policy, you changed lives. Thank you. The room erupted in applause. Evan saw the woman who'd been sleeping in her car, now in stable housing and thriving. He saw the man with the broken tooth, now smiling with confidence. He saw parents who could actually afford childcare, workers who could access mental health support, people who'd been given dignity along with their paychecks. Cassandra was there too, standing in the back, and when their eyes met, she mouthed two words. Thank you. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, Portland blanketed in fresh snow that made the city look like a postcard. Evan's apartment was still small, still cramped, but it felt different now. Warm, full. Lily had decorated with construction paper snowflakes and strings of popcorn she'd made herself. Christmas music played softly in the background while Evan and Lily worked together in the kitchen, making lasagna from scratch. "Is Ms. Wren really coming to dinner?" Lily asked, carefully layering noodles under Evan's supervision. "She really is. And Lily, I need you to understand something. Ms. Wren is my friend. She's also my boss, but more importantly, she's someone who's very special to both of us. She's someone who was alone and needed family, just like we needed her." "Is she going to be part of our family?" Evan paused, considering the question. "I think in a lot of ways she already is. Not in the way you're thinking, she's not going to be your mom or anything like that. But family isn't always about being related. Sometimes it's about choosing to show up for each other, to care about each other, to be there even when it's hard. Ms. Wren does that for us, and we do that for her." "Okay," Lily said simply. "I like her. She's nice." The knock came at 6, and this time Evan knew exactly who it would be. Cassandra stood in the hallway holding a casserole dish, her hair dusted with snow just like it had been a year ago, but her expression was completely different, not lost or desperate, but warm and genuinely happy. "I made lasagna," she said with a sheepish smile. "Then I realized you were probably making dinner. I should have called." "We made lasagna too," Evan said, laughing. "I guess we're having a lot of lasagna." "Ms. Wren," Lily appeared behind Evan, grinning. "We have matching food. That means we're meant to be together." Cassandra's eyes went bright. "I think you're absolutely right." They ate both lasagnas because neither wanted to hurt the other's feelings, laughing at the absurdity of it. Cassandra had brought homemade instead of store-bought, and it was delicious but not better than theirs, just different. They talked about Lily's volcano project and Sarah's upcoming graduation and the new programs launching in January. They talked about the past year, about how much had changed, about how grateful they all were. After dinner, they sat in the living room with the Christmas tree lights blinking softly, Lily between Evan and Cassandra on the couch, showing them her latest drawings, mostly dinosaurs with improbable anatomy and creative color choices. "This one's a T-Rex who's actually nice," Lily explained. "Everyone thinks T-Rexes are mean, but this one helps other dinosaurs and shares his food." "I like that story," Cassandra said. "Sometimes the things we think we know about someone turn out to be wrong when we actually get to know them." Evan caught her eye over Lily's head, understanding the deeper meaning. A year ago, he'd thought of Cassandra as the untouchable CEO, someone who lived in a different world and couldn't possibly understand his struggles. She'd thought of herself as successful, but empty, surrounded by everything except what mattered. They'd both been wrong, and the wrongness had led to something neither had expected: genuine friendship. As the evening wore on, Lily started to fade, her head drooping against Evan's shoulder. He carried her to bed, tucked her in with the stuffed triceratops she'd insisted on naming Dr. Muffin, and came back to find Cassandra washing dishes in his small kitchen. "You don't have to do that," Evan said. "I know, I want to." She handed him a dish to dry. "This is nice, normal. I spent so many years thinking normal was boring, something to escape from. But it turns out normal, real connection, simple kindness, showing up, is exactly what I needed." "Me too," Evan admitted. "I spent so long just trying to survive that I forgot what it felt like to actually live. You reminded me." "We reminded each other." Cassandra dried her hands, turned to face him. "Evan, I need you to know something. This, tonight, the programs we've built, the friendship we have, it's the most meaningful thing I've ever been part of. Not the most profitable or the most impressive on paper, but the most real, the most human. You've taught me what actually matters. You gave me back my life," Evan said. "You saw me when I felt invisible, believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself, and gave me the chance to be the father Lily deserves. I don't know how to thank you for that. You already have. Every day watching you help people, seeing you be present for Lily, knowing you're building something that will outlast both of us. That's the thank you. That's everything." They finished the dishes in comfortable silence, then sat back on the couch with tea, talking quietly about the year ahead. More programs to launch, more lives to change, more battles to fight for dignity and support. But also more time with Lily, more stability, more proof that caring about people didn't make you weak. It made you essential. Cassandra left near midnight, standing at the door with her coat on, looking reluctant to go back to her big empty house. You could stay, Evan said. The couch pulls out. It's not comfortable, but it's better than driving in the snow. I should go home, Cassandra said, but she was smiling. But Evan? Next year, maybe we plan this better. Maybe it becomes a tradition instead of a one-time thing. I'd like that. Lily would too. Merry Christmas, Evan. Merry Christmas, Cassandra. He watched from the window as she drove away, her taillights disappearing into the snowy night. Then he looked around his small apartment, the tree with its cheap lights, the dishes still in the drainer, Lily's drawings covering the refrigerator, the comfortable clutter of a life being lived instead of just endured. A year ago, this apartment had felt like a prison. Tonight, it felt like home. Evan checked on Lily one more time, found her sleeping peacefully with Dr. Muffin clutched to her chest. He stood in her doorway and felt overwhelming gratitude for this small person who'd given his life purpose, who'd motivated him to keep going when everything felt impossible, who reminded him every day what actually mattered. In his own room, Evan looked at the photos on his nightstand. One of Lily at the zoo, laughing with cotton candy on her nose. One of the warehouse team at Sarah's graduation party. One from the company celebration where Marcus had made his speech, Cassandra beside Evan, both of them genuinely smiling. His phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra. Thank you for tonight, for reminding me what family feels like. See you Monday. Evan smiled and texted back, thank you for knocking on my door, for everything that came after. See you Monday. He set the phone down and turned off the light, but he didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, he lay there thinking about the past year, about how a single moment, 3 knocks on Christmas night, had changed everything. About how loneliness and struggle had transformed into connection and purpose. About how 2 people drowning separately had learned to help each other float. Outside, snow continued to fall on Portland, gentle and persistent, covering the city in quiet white. Inside, Evan Pierce fell asleep feeling something he'd thought he'd lost forever. The certainty that he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do, surrounded by people who mattered and who thought he mattered too. The apartment was still small. The bills were still there, though more manageable now. The future was still uncertain in the way all futures are. But none of that felt overwhelming anymore. Because Evan had learned something essential over the past year. You didn't have to have everything figured out to move forward. You just had to keep showing up, keep caring, keep choosing connection over isolation. And somewhere across the city, in a house too big for one person, Cassandra Wren was learning the same lesson. That success without meaning was just expensive emptiness. That the best investments weren't measured in quarterly returns but in changed lives. That the courage to knock on someone's door when you needed connection could transform not just one life, but dozens, hundreds, an entire company culture. That sometimes salvation came in the form of sandwiches and honesty, and the willingness to be vulnerable with someone who understood what drowning felt like. That family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was choice. Sometimes it was showing up. Sometimes it was 2 people and a little girl sharing too much lasagna on Christmas Eve, building something warm and honest in the middle of winter. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.